Chapter 17. Thug Passion. I feel weird, Mimi said, shifting uncomfortably in the booth at Swirl. You haven't even had a drink yet, Vanessa replied, wondering where Lena was. No, down there, Mimi mumbled. Oh, your pussy feels weird. Mimi's face contorted into an expression of embarrassment. So what do you call it? Vanessa asked, amused. Not that, Mimi said quietly. Sweetie, how can you love your pussy if you can't even say the word? Vanessa sighed, thinking this little chica had a lot to learn. My pussy is my best friend. I'm sure it is, Mimi said dryly. She had never thought about hers as something she should love or not love. It was just there. What do you think I should call it? Vagina? Vanessa said, precisely enunciating each syllable. Mimi tried not to smile, but couldn't help it. I want you to say it, Vanessa insisted. What? You know what, Vanessa urged. It was fun to make Mimi squirm, and so easy. My pussy feels weird, Mimi said very quickly and very quietly, sorry she had ever brought it up. It was your first time, Vanessa said easily, looking around to see which bold-faced names were in attendance that night. You'll get used to it. After their first meeting, when she'd noticed unsightly whiskers sprouting out of the bikini Mimi was trying on, Vanessa had dragged her to J Sisters for a bikini wax. Not a Brazilian, for which the J Sisters had become famous. There was even an autographed photo of Gwyneth Paltrow in their salon, on which the star had written, "Thanks for changing my life." Vanessa said she was getting a modified Brazilian. A down-below baldy, which left a strip of hair visible up top. She let Mimi come into the small room to watch her getting all prettied up, after which Mimi was so aghast, she refused to go next. But Vanessa browbeat her little follower into submission. Mimi screamed with pain when hair was ripped, she was flipped over, and her legs were twisted like a pretzel. She felt like she was in the throes of childbirth. Vanessa held her hand, acting like her bikini wax Lamaze coach. Now that you've gone bare, you'll never go back, Vanessa had reassured her afterward. Guys love it. Now all Mimi had to do was find a guy. Please don't tell me you're a virgin, Vanessa said, thinking it was a definite possibility. Not at all, Mimi exclaimed defensively. High school boys, huh? Vanessa sniffed. Vanessa sniffed a lot. It was like an open carton of rancid milk followed her everywhere. Some, Mimi said, her voice full of false confidence. My last boyfriend is a quarterback at Georgia State, she added, though last implied there had been others. And really, Jamal was her first and only boyfriend. He got a football scholarship. Really? Vanessa was intrigued by celebrity, even at the collegiate level. You think he'll go pro? I don't care. Mimi sniffed like Vanessa was always doing. It's over with us. She was relieved to see Lena heading toward their table because she did not want to get into a discussion about that jackass Jamal. With her frayed Seven for All Mankind denim mini, Lena had on a fitted gray t-shirt with a color photo of a very young Grandmaster Flash bending over a turntable with the words, "Yes, yes, y'all," written underneath in bubble letters. Her red and white 1988 high-top Air Jordans were purchased at Premium Goods in Brooklyn, a store that trafficked in hard-to-find classic kicks. The price for such footwear began at $300. While she was out in BK, she'd had a 4-finger gold ring that spelled Lena made. A picture or column mention of Lena's having this old-school moment would no doubt wind up in some magazine, and she would no doubt whine about how annoying it was that everyone else would then bite her style, but truth was, that was the very reason she'd gone through all the trouble. From her shoulder, she pulled down a late 80s ghetto blaster. She'd gotten it on eBay, put it on the table, and turned around. "Look what Crazy got me!" It looked like she had Vaseline smeared all over her lower back. Mimi leaned in and Vanessa picked up the votive candle on the table for illumination. Underneath the ointment, they could make out the word "crazy" a few inches above Lena's ass, in inch-high Gothic letters. Mimi and Vanessa exchanged horrified glances. "Oh, girl, you're trippin'!" Mimi whooped. "Loca is right," Vanessa cried, about the tattoo and the outfit. She would never consider getting a tattoo anywhere on her body. Why tamper with perfection? "Hush," Lena said gaily. "You know it's hot." "So, it's official, I guess," Mimi murmured disapprovingly. She hadn't seen Lena in a week because Crazy G was in town. Mimi was concerned because Lena told her she'd flown him in, which Mimi took to mean she'd paid for his plane ticket. And since she couldn't have guys stay at her huge place or Henrietta, the housekeeper, would report it back to her father, they'd been holed up in the W Hotel on Union Square, doing the nasty non-stop. Mimi was sure Lena had paid for the room. "Yes." Lena swooned, in too much of a tizzy to catch Mimi's disapproving tone. "We're in love." "Did he get a tattoo of your name?" Vanessa ventured. "No, but I got him a necklace from Jacob's," Lena said, as if accepting an expensive gift from her was somehow an expression of his love. Though she was still trying to cut down on the boozing, she ordered a shot of tequila. She was so happy she had to celebrate. She'd just have one. Or two. "Oh, from Jacob's. You're really ballin' now," Vanessa droned sarcastically. She thought the trinkets that all the rappers bought from the Diamond District gem merchant known as Jacob the Jeweler were ridiculously tacky. Alonzo had explicit instructions never to buy her anything there. "Ballin' for real," Lena carped back, reveling in the fun of offending Vanessa. 15 G's. Mimi was lost. Who was Jacob? "You spent $15,000 on that nobody?" Vanessa wailed, truly concerned now. Lena felt like she'd been slapped. Vanessa was calling her nigga a nobody? He was on the verge of being signed by a major label, and she was going to be right there by his side when it happened. "He's a great lyricist, Nessa," Lena explained, pulling on her gold door-knocker earrings, which you could tell were already infecting her holes. "He's about to blow up. Kaboom! And you can't get much for 15 G's. It was tiny." The waitress brought the tequila shot, and Lena took it from her hand and knocked it back without ever letting the glass touch the table. Wait, back it up," Mimi interjected. "You spent $15,000 on a necklace for Crazy G?" Lena shrugged as if it were nothing. "What's your father gonna say?" Mimi said in a grave whisper. Vanessa had told her that Lena's father was some big-time lawyer and he despised rap, rappers, and purveyors of rap music like Lamont. Most of all, he hated that his Park Avenue-reared daughter was so obsessed with all three. Mimi wondered what he'd think if he learned Lena was dating a thuggish rapper named Crazy G, who practically had a bottle of Hennessy glued to his hand. "He won't know," Lena said, in her best I-can-do-whatever-the-fuck-I-want voice. "Daddy's accountant will notice, but I'll just tell him Jacob's is a clothing store." Mimi smelled the distinct odor of trouble, but she decided to leave it alone. Mustafa returned to the table from the bar where he had been chatting up a friend. He sat next to Vanessa, who immediately announced, "Lena's gone loca." Mustafa wasn't sure why this was news. Wasn't she always? Lena hefted her butt onto the table and peeled back the waist of her mini so he could get a good look. "It's still healing." He leaned close, inspected the tattoo, and threw his hands in the air ecstatically. "Oh, baby!" he squealed. "It's so hot!" Lena scooted off the table, turned on her boombox, which started blasting LL Cool J's Rock the Bells, pulled her fuzzy red Kangol down low, and busted out doing the wop until everyone lapsed into hysterics. Chapter 18. Don't believe the hype. Lamont lay in bed congratulating himself. It was a personal coup to have caught the attention of the woman, barely a woman at 21, every man desired and every woman envied. And tonight, he'd done more than just catch her attention. Much more. She was Emma White, ubermodel of the moment. You couldn't go anywhere without seeing her sun-kissed visage or her impossibly perfect body. In the window of Victoria's Secret, wearing only a miracle bra, on the sides of buses and Calvin Klein ads, on the cover of Vogue every other month, in commercials, swinging her luscious golden tresses in slow motion and blowing kisses for CoverGirl. Everywhere you looked, there was the gloriously beautiful Emma White. Vanessa hated her with a passion. He'd had models. He'd had a supermodel or two. But Emma was the super of all supes, in her prime. And caught up in the euphoric throes of sticking it to her, he did the unthinkable. Banged her without a doctor's go-ahead. Or a condom. She seemed so fresh-faced, so clean. Now Lamont rolled over and cursed himself for going bareback. He'd pulled out, but damn, it had felt good. It had been so long since he'd felt the sweet warmth of a pussy. If he knew a woman wasn't relationship material, not many were, and he'd soon be rid of her, he wouldn't send her to get tested, which meant stuck between a rock and a hard dick, he had to use rubbers. Aside from the threat of disease, you never knew when one of these gold diggers would accidentally wind up pregnant after they told you they were on the pill. His last real girlfriend, Kendra, had been sent to his doctor for Depo-Provera shots every 3 months, so there would be no slip-ups. So many stupid guys got trapped like that. Floss had just caught his 3rd paternity case. All that meant was a permanent headache and a lot of money spent supporting a woman you'd never loved and may not have even liked all that much. Or else the general consensus was that you were a deadbeat. He'd heard that if a chick had your baby, she had legal rights to 17% of your income. 17% of his annual salary would make a bitch a millionaire. It had taken him a long time to make his first million. Longer than 9 months. 17% just for fucking a guy who's doing all the work? It was a shell game. He'd be a fool to take that big a risk just to dip into some hole for a few minutes. Lamont shuddered dramatically at the possibility. He couldn't stand children. He often had trouble sleeping, and everything needed to be just so for him to clock some deep REM time. The temperature had to be exactly 65 degrees. The sheets had to be at least 300 thread count. The room had to be completely dark, and he could not be touched at all, or he'd wake right up. The mere thought of a screaming baby within 50 feet was more than he could bear. He had never held his 2-year-old nephew, though he had Imani buy the kid the most extravagant birthday gifts she could find. But the ravishing Emma White wasn't the trapping type. She probably had more paper than he did. He'd heard that she'd cleared $15 million last year alone. Realizing that was more than he'd made last year, for a moment he felt inadequate. His ego recovered as he reminded himself that models were like athletes. They had maybe a 5-year window during which they could make the bulk of their money before they fell off into oblivion. He, on the other hand, would be around for a long, long time. And if he took over Irv's spot as chairman and sold Triple Large to Augusta, he would soon be a very wealthy man indeed. He rewound that thought and replaced the if with when. When he took over Irv's spot. When he sold Triple Large. The power of positive thinking could do wonders. He looked at the bathroom door through which the angelic supermodel had disappeared. He'd always been able to get women, but there were some, the real super fly girls, who thought their shit didn't stink. And those were the ones he wanted the worst. Who'd treat him like a roach before his pockets got fat. Now he was worthy of the baddest bitch in the world. He wanted to call Nate and Witchy immediately to gloat. They'd been with him earlier when he ran into her. "Monty!" Emma had addressed Lamont familiarly, though they'd only met briefly on a few occasions. "I hear you signed a singer." "Sure did," he said. "I thought you only worked with the homeboys." "I'm branching out." "Did you know it's my dream to be a singer?" she'd said in her Texas drawl. It happened to be karaoke night at Curb. "Why don't you go up and sing something, Emma?" Lamont had encouraged. "Show us what you got, baby." "I couldn't. I just sang in the shower. I'm not ready for so much exposure," she'd said. It might have been a funny remark, considering how far and wide her modeling gigs had exposed her, but the irony was lost on Emma. "Well, maybe you could audition for me privately," Lamont had suggested. He was shocked when she actually took him up on his subsequent offer to come back to his place for a nightcap. And he'd gotten her singing all right, hitting all the high notes between his Pratesi sheets. But he couldn't call his boys yet. That would have to wait until she was out of earshot. And he wouldn't dare ask her to leave in the middle of the night. He was so lost in his reverie, 30 minutes had gone by before he realized she was still in the bathroom, probably doing her model shit. He tapped at the door. "Emma," he said softly. "Emma, baby, you taking a bubble bath or something?" No answer. He hesitantly pushed the door, but it opened only a few inches. He pushed harder and saw a pale foot with perfectly manicured red toes pointing toward the ceiling. What the hell? He squeezed into the bathroom. "Emma!" he screamed in horror. She lay on the hard tile, naked and seemingly unconscious. He couldn't help marveling at how hot she was. She had full, perfectly round, natural breasts and neatly trimmed blonde pubic hair. Had she passed out? She had been drinking, but not enough to lead to this. Lamont bent down and gently slapped her once rosy cheeks. "Emma, baby!" he wailed. "Wake up! Emma!" Lamont tried lifting her taut torso and noticed something on the floor by her waist. A syringe. He leaned back against the marble bathtub with Emma's golden locks splayed across his thick thighs. Raising two clenched fists skyward, he howled, "Fuck!" This fetching, flaxen-haired Southern belle, who had beguiled him with stories of how close her family had been growing up in a little town outside of Dallas, could not be a fucking junkie. There wasn't a mark on her exquisite body. Lamont rocked back and forth, stroking her face feverishly. Then he dropped her like a stone, her head knocking on the floor as he raced to the phone. "Oh, this is a damn shame," Unflappable Nate said 10 minutes later as he bent down on Lamont's bathroom floor to check Emma for a pulse. He'd sped right over after calling Mustafa, the non-performing performance artist, a known drug abuser. The 10 minutes had seemed like an eternity to Lamont. "Wake up, Emma! Wake up!" he'd pleaded, as if she were just in a really deep slumber. Lamont held her head in his lap and gazed at her perfectly symmetrical features until he saw something else. Tomorrow's likely headline in the New York Tribune. Supermodel ODs in rap mogul's penthouse. Fuck! He hadn't even done anything to her, but those media vultures would make it seem that he was the villain, that he had somehow defiled her. It would somehow come off like he'd killed her. Just because he was a hip-hop nigga who'd had the nerve to rise from the Marcy Projects and she was the whitest woman in America. That's why calling an ambulance was not an option. Nate was his personal 911 in delicate situations. Nate would help him move her so if she died, she'd die elsewhere. Damn, she's hot, Nate commented as Mustafa rummaged through his black doctor's bag. Lamont stood looking over Nate's shoulder. It was good thinking that Nate had called Mustafa. Only a druggie knows how to treat a druggie. Lamont hadn't even thought of that. He'd been so panicked. Heroin, Mustafa diagnosed. But she doesn't have track marks, Lamont said. Lamont felt himself trembling, and he hoped that Nate and Mustafa wouldn't notice. He often instilled fear in others, but letting his own fear show was unacceptable. He couldn't remember the last time he'd felt this scared. Usually a crisis invigorated him, shifted him into battle mode. Business maneuvers often felt like life-or-death situations to him, but this really was. He'd spent almost 10 years building a name and a burgeoning empire. If this incident turned out badly, it could change everything. But, he suddenly thought, would it be all bad?
This ends side 1 of cassette 4. Please turn side 2.
Scandal boosted careers all the time. It helped minor celebs break out onto the national radar. And he hadn't done anything to Emma. She had gotten into this all by her damn self. The reasoning was Machiavellian, but so what? Nate's uptight, overeducated girlfriend, Jordan, had given him a book called What Would Machiavelli Do? A few years back. He never read anything that didn't affect him professionally. Jordan was always reading some 500-page novel for fun by the pool in the Hamptons or when they all went on vacation together. What a bore. He read video treatments for his artists. He read magazine articles in which he was mentioned, and even then just skimmed until he saw his own name. He had no time to read for pleasure. If it don't make dollars, it don't make sense. If he wanted information, he watched CNN. Machiavelli. Never heard of the guy. But he'd gobbled that book up flying home from St. Bart's. He sensed that Jordan was subtly trying to tell him something, teach him some lesson. The book was her Christmas gift to him, and he saw on the back cover that it cost $11.95. Don't put yourself out, Jordy baby. She couldn't even splurge on a hardcover? And that year, Imani had sent the cheap bitch a pair of Jimmy Choos. But it had turned out to be a good read. He still wasn't sure what point Jordy was trying to make. She was always working an angle. But he had Imani send her a thank you note that said, "Love the book. This nigga's got it all figured out." Ends justified the means. Said it all, didn't it? A dead supermodel in his apartment, through no fault of his own, would get him into Vanity Fair for sure. "Look between her toes," Mustafa said calmly. Lamont spread her toes apart and noticed tiny scars between them. "Damn, she even has nice feet," Nate said. "They soft?" "No, they're cold," Lamont shouted, regarding Nate with a scornful look. "Because she's dying in my fucking crib, money." Why would Emma do this to herself? She had everything. And to think he used to drool over the glamour girls, believing them way beyond his reach. Then he made a name for himself and a little money, and they began coming on to him. But it didn't take long to realize they weren't all that special. Sometimes they smelled bad. Some of them were average pretty when the makeup came off, or their tits sagged when the bra came undone. And all of them were more insecure than you'd think any woman of their good looks and fortune would be. Lamont looked at poor Emma, sprawled out on the marble floor, lips turning blue, and felt sorry for himself. Another fantasy bites the dust, he thought. Maybe he should find a normal girl with a normal career, someone who brought less drama. Beautiful, though. No, he told himself after a moment's contemplation. That'd probably be boring. Mustafa plunged a shot of Narcan into Emma's breastbone with the precision of a surgeon, and they all leaned over her, waiting for signs of life. Emma finally let out a strangled gasp of breath and moaned quietly. Her dainty hand went to the throbbing at the back of her head. Her eyelids fluttered. Then her baby blues focused curiously on the 3 black men staring down at her perfect, naked body. Chapter 19.